Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and Gamefound over the next week. If you're new here, we do this every single week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you do want to stay up to date, this is the place to be. But before I get started, I should mention that I am just getting over a cold right now, so if I sound a little bit stuffy or if I'm slurring my words a little bit more than usual, I'm going to blame that. But also before I start this video, I do like to go over some news and announcements that I just found out about over the past week. And I don't have too much, so I'm just going to go over something cool that I found and also let you know a little bit about how the LevelUp retreat went. So first I just want to go over some stats that were just shared on Kickstarter's blog, going over stats of 2024, and I think this is pretty cool. And if you don't already know this, Kickstarter makes most of its money from the tabletop genre within their crowdfunding platform. They don't mention the overall percentage, but they do mention that 83% of all games pledges were tabletop games, and just last year over 6,500 tabletop projects were launched, with about 80% of them being successful, which amounted to about $220 million pledged. They do also mention the top 10 crowdfunded games here, with the number 1 being Brandon Sanderson's RPG, which is no surprise to me because I do remember this one launching, and it made quite a buzz and broke all sorts of records and ended up raising over $15 million on its own, which is almost $10 million more than the game that came in second place, which is the Altered TCG, which I did think looked like an interesting game. But what I'm also taking from this is how much different this top 10 is from the games that I'm interested in, because out of all the games on this list, although I did find some of them interesting, there's actually only one that I did end up backing, and it just barely made the list at number 9, which is Return to the Seventh Citadel. But Kickstarter is just one of the crowdfunding platforms that are available, so it would be interesting to see these stats consolidated across all the platforms. I'm not sure if that information's available, but Kickstarter is the biggest, so this one on its own is at least very interesting. I am finally done all my traveling, which means that LevelUp has come to an end, and it was a lot of fun, and I got to play a ton of different games. I thought it was interesting when I went to Gen Con. I played a ton of games there as well, but there wasn't many that really interested me. They were all fine, but there wasn't anything that really wowed me, other than a few older games that I just hadn't played yet. And I ended up coming from Gen Con basically wondering, do I even like board games? But I'm happy to say that LevelUp did rekindle the fire for me, because pretty much every game there was an absolute hit. I'm not sure which ones I will end up buying, but every game I played was a lot of fun, and I'm glad to play it with a bunch of people that I don't see too often from the community, and a lot of people that I only just met in person at the LevelUp retreat itself. I'm not going to go through all the games I played, but I just wanted to mention a few highlights, with the first one being the Black Forest, which was very different from any other Uwe Rosenberg game that I've ever played. And I should mention that I never did play Glass Road, which Black Forest does re-implement, although it was also mentioned that Black Forest is actually more aligned with what Uwe Rosenberg originally designed, but the publisher asked him to cut it down, which is how Glass Road was created. The game combines worker placement with this really clever resource tracker, which is like nothing I've ever seen, and it kind of acts like a dial on a spring, where as you move these tokens up on the right hand side, this dial's always going to want to move clockwise, so as you clear up space, this side of the dial is going to be pushing forward, which represents those resources being automatically converted into the more valuable resources on the left hand side. My only issue with this game is that it does suffer from a bit of analysis paralysis, because there are a whole bunch of different tiles that you can buy, and just like in typical Uwe Rosenberg style, they're all available to you at the beginning of the game. This means that you can spend quite a lot of time on your turn deciding which action you want to take, because they could all grant you with different resources, which can all grant you with different subsets of those tiles that you could potentially buy. Going back and forth and considering all those options can take a lot of time if you are a person that wants to consider all the options, which I am. Life of the Amazonia was also a game that I really wanted to play for a long time now, and I'm happy that I was able to play it. It's definitely one that I was considering buying, but I think in the end I just want a little bit more variability with the different animals that you can play in a given game, because there are base animals that you use in this game, and then there's some unique animals that each player is going to get. But I do think this is an excellent game, and if they do make an expansion for this one that fixes that issue, this will probably be one that I do end up backing. At its core, you're going to be placing tiles and then trying to get enough resources to purchase animals, and then place those animals on certain patterns in order to score their victory points. What's really cool about this is that this is also a bag building game. You're going to be building up your bag with coins that you'll be able to use to purchase other tokens that you'll then be able to put into your bag in order to change the types of draws that you'll get on a given turn. And there's also different upgrades that you can purchase in order to save some of those tokens that you don't spend for your next turn in order to have even more tokens to choose from. White Castle was probably objectively the best game that I've played, and I know that's a subjective thing to say, but I'm saying this purely from a design standpoint. I didn't really have any issues with this game whatsoever, and this game packs a lot in such a tiny box. Not only that, but it has a lot of really unique mechanisms like the dice drafting, where you're going to be drafting from either side of these different bridges, with each of the bridges holding a different colored die, and the different action locations requiring different values and colors of dice for you to activate them. On top of the dice worker placement, you can also unlock different types of meeples from your own personal board, which not only unlock different opportunities beneath them as you take them off your board, but it also acts as a more secondary worker placement mechanism where you can put those workers out on different locations and even move them out on the board in order to get additional benefits. I really like this one, and I heard it was even better with the expansion, which unfortunately I wasn't able to try, but if you do get a chance to play this one, I do highly recommend it. I'm just going to give a quick mention to Aquatica. It's a very simple game, but it's very effective in what it does. Also a game that I have almost no complaints with its design. I do think it could probably get a little bit samey, at least if you just have the base game, but there's already a few expansions out for this already, and I have played with one of them. I haven't played with the most recent one, but I would really like to, and if I feel like that mixes it up enough, this is probably one that I will end up adding to my collection. Feed the Kraken was another surprise hit for me because I'm normally not a big fan of deduction games, but in this game you're going to be playing either as pirates, sailors, or cultists. You're all on the same ship and collectively guiding where that ship goes, but each of the different groups want the ship to end up in a certain final tile. But the cultists also have another thing going for them, because every time that the ship enters a tile that has a Kraken in it, someone needs to be thrown overboard in order to prevent that Kraken from just tearing apart the ship. Of course, the sailors want to throw off the pirates, and the pirates want to throw off the sailors, but the cultists actually want to be thrown off themselves, because that is another way that they can win the game if the main cultist does get sacrificed to that Kraken. We played this with 11 people, and that's probably the ideal way to play the game, which is really impressive to have such a fun time with so many people, because not many games play up to that player count, and the ones that do, I rarely find myself wanting to add to my collection. But this is one that I'll definitely be trying to seek out, and I hope that they do launch another Kickstarter sometime soon, because I do want the Kickstarter version. I am also honored to say that I did come in second in the official BoxFart competition. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically a competition to see who can make the best fart by closing a box. If you've ever wrapped up one of your board games and you're closing the box and it happened to make a little toot, well, now it's an official sport. Of course, this whole event was created and organized by Jeff from the Dragon's Tomb, and he did a fantastic job. I'm not sure if there's video footage of it. I heard there was, but I haven't been able to find it myself. But definitely follow along with his channel. He might post something, and if not, he has a ton of other hilarious videos for you to check out already. And although I didn't win, I'm still very proud of my creation in this BoxFart competition, because I stayed up many late nights over the years just trying to make this work, and went through many sacrifices and many deaths, because what I came up with was the cardboard centipede. This is when you take multiple boxes and put them on top of each other and make all of them fart at once. This has never been done before, and as a child I was shunned from society and people called me mad for trying to make this happen. But thanks to Jeff and the people at the LevelUp retreat, I was able to make this dream come true, and it was truly a historic moment in the BoxFart legacy. And if you weren't able to make it this time, there will be more, maybe even later this year. But regardless of all of that, I do always like to mention Alex at the start of these videos, because him and I do work together keeping track of all these upcoming campaigns. I do these every week, but he posts a video at the start of each month, going over the month and letting you know the heavy hitters for that month. Of Of course, he posts a ton of other content as well, including playthroughs and reviews and follow-ups on the different games while they are on crowdfunding. So if you do want additional details and more information as it becomes available throughout the campaign, you'll definitely want to check him out, and I will have him linked in the description down below. But that's everything I got for an intro, and I should probably get into the games before I lose my voice completely, so let's check them out. And the first campaign we have launches on February 11th, and this one is called Terminus Frontier. And this one is a cooperative sci-fi campaign game where players are going to be playing as a team of soldiers patrolling a lawless region in space. Games are going to be played over a series of fights or stealth missions where enemies, civilians, and other points of interest are going to be placed out onto the board according to that specific setup. Each player is going to have their own personal character that has their own stats, abilities, and unique deck of cards, and there's going to be 3 different skill trees for each of the characters that you can explore as you upgrade. Each round, players are going to be drawing 5 cards from their draw deck in order to perform their actions, with many of these cards also requiring you to spend a certain amount of action points in order to play that card. These cards can grant you with all sorts of different types of movement and attacks, and when you are firing a weapon, rather than dice rolling, you're going to be flipping an ammo card that you have equipped to that weapon in order to see how many hits that you are able to land. What's really cool about this is that if you get actions that do allow you to fire your weapons, they're usually going to give you some sort of selection of single fire, burst fire, or full auto. Of course, firing more rounds does allow you to increase the amount of cards that you get to flip, but it does reduce your accuracy. This also depletes your deck faster, and if you do run out of ammo cards, you just have to perform a reload action in order to shuffle up that deck and reload your gun. But if you are someone who likes to make every shot count, there are also aim actions that do allow you to reveal the top cards on your deck so you know exactly what's coming up. And not only can you upgrade your different weapons and swap them out with new ones, but you can also purchase and upgrade your ammo cards to put more powerful ammo cards into your deck. There's also a whole bunch of unique gear that players can find or purchase throughout the game, and each of the character boards are going to have 4 different slots where you can equip this gear, and they can do all sorts of different things like increase your hand size or your health, or of course help you with your defense or your aiming, and grant you all sorts of other special effects. There's a whole bunch of different enemies and bosses that players can encounter throughout the game, and each of these are also going to have their own cards that outline their stats and their behaviors and special effects and abilities. And what's interesting about the bosses is that not only are they massive and have a really cool miniature associated with them, but they also have different locations on their body that you can target, and these can have different effects during the boss fight depending on which areas you want to target first. Players' actions might also add or remove threat from that specific player, and what this does is determine the targeting of the enemies, because the enemies are mostly going to want to target the player who has the most threat, and this is a good way to draw attention to you if you're worried about one of your teammates getting injured, or it might be something that you want to get rid of if you are the one that is currently in pain. Players can also take damage in the different areas of their bodies, and if they take too much, then that's going to be granting them a trauma card, and these can have all sorts of negative effects, but they also enter your draw deck, which is going to be muddying up your deck and making it a lot less effective. The game also features space exploration, and I believe it also does allow for squad versus squad skirmishes. If all that sounds interesting to you, definitely check this one out, and I will have it linked in the description down below. Also on the 11th, we have another space exploration game, and this one is called StarDriven Gateway. This one is a game where players are each going to be controlling their own starship and crew as they explore the distant colonies. This one is a game that I did think was launching a few months back, so I did already cover this one, and if you are interested to learn about it, I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. But if you do want to check out the campaign, I will also have that linked in the description down below. Players are captains controlling their own starship, and this is a game that offers a bunch of different scenarios that can all play very different from each other, and some of them can offer either cooperative, competitive, or even solo play. And each of them are going to be offering their own objectives that you're going to be trying to complete in order to gain victory points. Players are going to be using actions in order to explore space, revealing tiles, visiting planets, completing missions where they might have to spend crew or resources to do so, but you can also do things like discover anomalies, which are cards with special effects, and they're usually positive but can be negative if you haven't properly equipped for them. Of course, there's also some space combat to be had, and you're going to be fighting enemy ships using dice rolling, and the amount of dice that you get to roll depends on the charges that you've prepped your ship with. And the way that you prepare for all these actions is by loading up your shipboard, because each player is going to have their own shipboard, and you're going to be rolling different types of dice that you'll be able to assign to the different locations in order to be able to activate that station. But also, in order to activate it, you do need a crew member at that station. And each of the different spaces requires a different type of die in order to activate it, and you only have a limited number of each type of die. So you're going to have to pick and choose where you might want to assign those. Crew members do also act as a bit of a resource, as you do need them to activate the different stations, but then there are different objectives and missions where you might lose or trade them in order to complete different objectives. Unfortunately, I don't know too much more on the finer details of the game, so if you want to learn more about the gameplay, you'll have to check out the campaign for yourself, but I will have that linked down below. Also on the 11th, we have a really interesting game, and this one is called Vineyard, a winemaking game. And this one is a light to medium weight worker placement game, but what makes this one so interesting is that it's actually a shared worker placement. And what that means in this game is that there's 4 different workers that each have their own specialties in winemaking, and each player is going to have one of these boards with each of those characters and the different bonuses that they grant. One character might be better at gathering the ingredients that you need to make your wine, while another character might be better at brewing or aging that wine to perfection. But each round, players are going to be playing cards in order to manipulate those different workers' positions out on the board, which is going to determine which actions are available in the future. Players can also upgrade their cards so that they get additional bonuses specifically for themselves for taking particular actions. Unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of info on what different actions are available or how the different areas of the board actually work, so if you do want to learn more about that, you'll definitely want to check out the campaign, and I will have that linked in the description down below. Also on the 11th, we have Blood on the Sands, and this one is a gladiator arena combat game. Each player is going to be playing with a different gladiator that's going to be one of the distinct gladiator classes, each with its own unique abilities and armaments. Each is also going to have its own board in order to track things like its damage, its energy, and players will also have different cards that dictate the attacks that you'll have available for that gladiator. But players are going to be fighting their gladiators out on a hex arena, and at the start of each round, you're going to be rolling 6 action dice, and then depending on the values that you roll, that's going to be determining the types of actions that you have available to you. These actions could be for movement to help you move around the arena, attack, which allows you to, of course, attack the other gladiator, laurel, which can help win you favor with the crowd, which you can lose if you perform a turn without making an attack or movement towards your opponent, and losing that does come with negative consequences. There's respite dice, which allow you to heal your energy, because if you do run out of all your energy before you defeat your opponent, then that is one way that you can lose. And there are wild dice that allow you to use them for anything. Movement is really important in this game, because if you're pinned against the wall or if your enemy can flank you, then that's going to give them certain benefits when they do take the time to attack you. Attacks in this game come in the form of rolling 2 dice for your attack, and then your opponent is going to be rolling 2 dice for defense. You're going to be taking into consideration any modifiers, and if the attacker's dice roll is still higher, then they're going to be successful in their attack. As I mentioned, there's a bunch of different cards that dictate the types of attacks that you can perform, and when you attack, you're going to be choosing one of these to activate. You win the game if you're able to knock down or defeat your opponent, or if they run out of energy first. If you want to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description down below. Also on the 11th, we have Button Kingdoms, and this one's a card combat game where the players are playing as children, fighting for dominance of the neighborhood while protecting each of their own forts. This is one that has a really fun theme and some really fun artwork to go along with it, but players are going to be going through a few phases in a round. There's going to be the day phase where players are going to be playing cards in order to collect buttons, which essentially act as currency. You can use those buttons to purchase new cards or even upgrade your forts. Players are then going to be moving into an auction phase, which happens on the central board here. And there's going to be some cards put out on display, and then players are going to be placing these different tokens with different values and icons, with there being essentially 3 different types of these tokens. There's the ones that allow you to sell the card, and those are the ones with the numbers. There's the ones that allow you to buy the card, and then there's tokens that allow you to block the card. The player who tries to sell the card and places the lowest value token there is going to be the one that does so, and as part of that, they also get to decide which player they sell it to if multiple players put a token on that card in order to buy. That is, of course, if no block tokens are put there, because players can put block tokens out to prevent a card from being sold or bought at all. Once each of those are resolved, players move into the night phase, where players are going to be able to actually play their cards to attack the other players and put themselves in a better position. If you're interested to know more on the details of the gameplay on this one and what sort of actions you can take, definitely go ahead and check out the campaign, and I will have that linked in the description below. Also on the 11th, we have Biomes of Nilgiris, and this one's a cooperative game where players are working together as ecologists in India, and you're going to be trying to discover new species of animals, address ecological issues, and complete conservational missions. Each of the players' characters will operate differently from each other depending on the type of ecologist that they are, and the game plays in turns as players are trying to complete their missions, and each turn players can perform 3 of 8 different actions. You can travel around on the modular board, explore to open up new biome cards, journal to gain notes on your field guide, and then study in order to convert those notes into experience points. Players can also gain new gear, which they can take an action in order to equip. And of course, you can discover new species and take actions to conserve that species, and conserving species and biomes are the primary way to gain victory points. If you do want to learn more about this one, you can go ahead and find a link to the campaign in the description down below. Also on the 11th, we have a new expansion for the game Fateforge, and this one's going to be called Kin of the Wild. This is going to be introducing a new chapter that players can play through, but also playable pets that players can take along on the journey. But there's also going to be a bunch of new mechanisms and new ideas introduced with this expansion as well. And if you're not familiar with the original game, this is one that I was really interested in back when it launched. It looked like a really fun game, but I did also cover it back during that original campaign. So if you do want to learn how this one plays, I'll go ahead and roll that footage for you in a second here. But if you want to see more about this new campaign and what exactly it's going to be adding, they're going to be adding a bunch new surprises onto the campaign page once it launches. You can go ahead and find that in the description below, and of course click that notify me button in order to get notified once this one launches. And this is a cooperative RPG mythical action adventure where players are going to be playing as different heroes venturing out of their forested homeland to the crowded city out on an adventure. And the game starts players with the goal of heading into the city to free their emissary from the palace prison, but of course things will probably not go as planned, and the players are going to be thrown into some tough situations that will branch into so much more. And the way that the campaign's sectioned up is that it's broken into a bunch of smaller episodes that all play in about an hour or less, and the decisions made by the players as well as their successes and failures will have a ripple effect that impacts the scenarios played in the future. And in order to make all of this possible, the game does use an app in order to tell the story and the atmosphere, but also to remember and react to the player's choices. And this is a game that self-identifies as an action adventure, so you can expect a lot of action and excitement in the way that this campaign plays out, and each scenario will throw you into situations where you'll need to work together to defeat or avoid enemies, and managing your health and energy will be a large concern because you don't heal after every battle, but you will be gaining new gear and skills to help you along the way. And of course, if you want to know more, I have links in the description below. Also on the 11th, we have Siberian Manhunt, and this one is a head-to-head hidden movement game where one player is going to be playing as a fugitive trying to make their escape to the border of China, while the other player plays as the Soviet Secret Service trying to capture them before they're able to do that. What's really interesting about this one is that as the fugitive, not only are you trying to escape the KGB, but you're also going to have to deal with harsh weather, starvation, and hungry animals. But also, as the fugitive, the more you remain hidden, the more likely you are to escape, because there is this hidden movement track that you're going to be using to track how long you have been able to remain hidden. And if you're able to max that out, that is another way that you can lose the KGB and win the game. And the fugitive does remain hidden, and all the pawns that you're seeing out on the map here do belong to the KGB because you have different units that you're going to be controlling, and you can also upgrade those units to make some of your actions a little bit easier. Each of the players do play asymmetrically, but both of them are going to be playing based on their current supply of energy. The KGB player gains energy for each of the pawns that they have out on the map, whereas the fugitive is going to be recovering energy to full if they're in a town at the end of their previous turn, or they're only going to be recovering partial energy if they are in the wilderness. Another thing to note about the fugitive is that they can also find, steal, or craft different items, and they can also forage or hunt for food, which does give them additional energy if they are able to do that. If the fugitive does start their turn in the wilderness, they're also going to have to draw an encounter card, which can have positive or negative effects or different options depending on the card that they happen to draw. But then the fugitive's going to be using their energy mostly for movement as they move around the board, spending additional energy depending on the terrain that they're moving through or the current weather that they're going to have to endure. There are some other ways you can move as well, such as hitchhiking. That does make this a little bit easier, but everything does come with its own risks because the civilians can also reveal your location to the KGB if they are willing to. I did mention that you do gain all your energy when you do start your turn in a town, but anytime that you do enter a town, you do have to stop your movement and end your turn at that time, and there is also a chance that one of the citizens might squeal on you. Whenever that happens, the KGB player is going to be drawing a token from a bag to see if the civilians report you. The bag's going to have some loyal citizens that will report you to the KGB, but there's also silent citizens that maybe don't know anything about you or are maybe just unwilling to talk. Throughout the game, the fugitive does have the option to perform good deeds that does add more of those silent citizens into the bag. The KGB has a lot less to worry about because they have the support of the government in order to help them through any weather or terrain, so that's not going to have an effect on that player. They can spend an energy for each of their pawns in order to move and search in different locations, but they can also gain support from the government in the form of these various cards. These are all going to have some different special effects, and these can be purchased for a certain amount of energy, and when they are purchased, they're going to grant you with an instant effect at the time of purchasing it. There are some other tactics that the KGB player can use to their advantage, such as blocking locations with the Red Army, and they'll be able to put a token on certain locations, permanently blocking that location from the fugitive. The KGB player can also force a draw from the bag to try and find more intel on you by interrogating the locals in the various towns. All the locations also have a number associated with them, and this is how the fugitive is going to be keeping track of their current location because they're going to have a pad of paper that they're going to be keeping private, and anytime that they move to a new location, they're going to be writing that value on the pad of paper and then moving up the hidden movement track the distance that they moved. This means that each movement that the fugitive makes does give some information to the other player since they can see the distance that they moved, and if they had some idea of where that player was previously, this can give them a bit of a clue of where they might be now. Both of the players also do have the ability to trigger an attack on their turn, and if they do that, you're going to be using the cards that you started with or the cards that you crafted in order to initiate that attack, and then you're going to be rolling a die and adding that value to the card. You're going to be comparing the overall values to see who wins that attack, and if the fugitive is killed, then they do lose the game, but any agents that are killed are going to be replaced, but they will be pushed back to specific locations where they're able to spawn. This one looks really interesting to me, and I really do like the survival element here. It's definitely one that I would love to try, and if you think so too, you can go ahead and check it out, and I will have it linked down below. That's everything I got for you this week, and I did promise that the giveaways would come back, and I do got a few exciting ones for you this week, with the first one being a pledge for the current campaign from All Play Games, and this giveaway is going to include all 3 games offered in this campaign. The first one is Twinkle, Twinkle, which is a tile placement game where you're going to be placing these transparent tiles, trying to create different patterns of stars and constellations, as well as different celestial bodies that are all going to be scoring differently depending on the tiles drawn for that game. We also have Merchants of Andromeda, which is probably the heaviest of these 3 games, but this is a game where you're trying to earn the most amount of money, and there's going to be a bunch of different boards that all operate a little bit differently, and you'll be able to perform actions to interact with each of those different boards. You're going to be using action cards in order to do this, and each player is going to have a board in front of them, and every time it's your turn, you're going to be choosing 1 card to discard, 1 card to keep, and 1 card to auction off. The card you choose to discard is going to be granting you the resource on that card, whereas the card you choose to keep is going to be granting you its action, and then the one you choose to auction is going to be triggering a really interesting auction that has a timer, and the time left determines the price of that card, and it's whoever calls out that they want to buy it first that is going to be paying the price dictated by the amount of time left on that timer. The last game offered in this campaign is called Waddle, and this one is more of a chain building area control game where players are going to be trying to get the most penguins around different watering holes. And if you have the most around that watering hole, then you're going to be gaining the points of the fish located in that watering hole. That is not the only way that you can gain victory points in this game, though, because you're also going to be scoring for the size of your groups of penguins. So there are multiple things that you're going to be going for, and each of the watering holes are numbered, and you're going to be playing a number of rounds equal to the number of watering holes, with the number on the watering hole dictating which round is going to be focusing on that watering hole. Rather than placing one of your penguin tokens out, you can instead choose to pass, and that's going to allow you to move your turn marble to the other side of the board, which is going to be dictating your turn order for the next round. This can be very strategic if you really need a specific location around the next watering hole. And like I said, this giveaway is going to be for the all-in 3-game bundle, so I just want to thank AllPlay for donating such a nice pledge here. And all you got to do to enter this giveaway is leave a comment down below with the hashtag Twinkle. And you can say anything that you want, but if you're looking for something in particular, maybe you could let us know if you had the choice between visiting space or Antarctica. Which of the two would you choose? They're both kind of scary. The next giveaway is for a pledge for Dice Fights Heal or Steal, and this one is a dice fighting game where players are going to be rolling dice in order to attack, defend, or generate money, but the new expansion is going to be adding in a few other types of dice as well. But what's really cool about this game is that you also have a few other dice that are going to be controlling your health, are multiplying certain values of dice depending on which of the faces you want to invest in. The box itself does also operate as a die, and you can also purchase it if you fully max out the amount of money that you're able to acquire, and each face on the box die is worth 10 of whatever you roll. Each round, players are going to be simultaneously rolling their dice with the optional reroll, and then players will be able to distribute their attack dice to the other players, with of course defense dice being able to block against it. You'll be spending any money that you're able to acquire in order to upgrade your dice or purchase new dice, and the last player standing is going to be the one to win the game. I should have mentioned that the last giveaway was offered worldwide, and this one is too, but for this one, if you're in a location that requires you to pay VAT or tax, that is something that you will have to cover for this specific giveaway. If you're okay with that, this one is going to be getting you a copy of the base game as well as the new expansion, and under this giveaway, all you got to do is leave a comment down below with the hashtag dice, and you can say anything that you want, but if you're looking for something in particular, maybe you could let us know what your favorite type of fight is, whether it's boxing, MMA, medieval fighting, anything, jousting, I don't know, anything to settle a score. And that is everything I got for you this week. Good luck in the giveaways, and it is also Super Bowl weekend, so I hope whichever team you are rooting for wins the Super Bowl. If you're rooting for the Eagles, and if you're a Chiefs fan, I guess that's okay too. I did make a really strong bet that Taylor Swift would post on Instagram while she is at the Super Bowl. So Taylor, if you are watching, a loyal follower would really love to see some Super Bowl content. But I thought this was funny, and I think it has a decent chance to hit. So if you want to see if this pays off for me, tune in next episode. And until then, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.